5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast in partnership with Kidney Care UK, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.
Hi, and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior. My name is Dee Moore, and I am a Stage 4 Kidney Warrior. This podcast is dedicated to encourage, educate, and inspire as we explore all aspects of kidney disease, related chronic illnesses, and health. If you have any questions or ideas for topics you would like me to cover, please get in contact with me on social media using the handle Diary of a Kidney Warrior. In today's episode, I am bringing you a kidney warrior story from a parent's perspective. Now, there's always something you can learn from someone's story, something that can bring inspiration and hope. My guest today from Belfast, Northern Ireland is Elizabeth McKenna. Elizabeth joins me to share the story of her 10-year-old son David, who is born with chronic kidney disease, and the lessons they as a family have learned along David's kidney warrior journey. Hi, and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior, the podcast. How are you doing today, Elizabeth?
I'm great, Dee. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm really excited about our interview today. This is the first time, actually, that I will be interviewing the parent of a child with CKD. So we're going to be looking at something that we on Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast have not looked at before. And that is a parent's perspective of what it's like when your child has CKD and the different challenges, the different highs and lows of what it is to be on that journey. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you and to learn more. So without further ado, my first question is, how did David's kidney warrior journey begin and how was he diagnosed?
David was diagnosed at birth. I had a relatively easy pregnancy. There was no signs of chronic kidney disease before pregnancy or during pregnancy. And it was when he was born, he initially he looked well. He came across like a healthy, normal delivery, normal baby. And as I started to feed him, I could see that he wasn't maybe feeding and putting on weight as they would have liked it to happen. So we stayed in a wee bit longer in hospital post-delivery. And he did start to feed a bit better. But as the week went on, I just knew that there was something, but I didn't know what it was. He was just very tired and lethargic, and he wasn't really, like, he could open his eyes and all, but you could just tell there was definitely something. And the midwife kept saying, oh, no, it's just, he just needs a wee kick. He's still, he's used to being in your tummy. And by day 7, I got a different midwife and I told her, there's just something not right. I don't know what it is. And thank God I wasn't breastfeeding. I was feeding him with a bottle. So I knew exactly how much was going in. And she said, right, well, don't worry about it. Let's sit down. We'll weigh him. We'll take a look at him and we'll see. And I said, right, okay. And by this stage, I was ready to go to hospital. So I was just like, look, if somebody has to, I was a new mummy. He was my first child. If somebody has to teach me how to feed him, I'm really not precious. I must be doing something wrong. And she weighed him and she had a look at him and she said, no, I think you need to go to the hospital. And I'll never forget it. I was still in my jammies. And she said, take your time, pack a bag for you and the baby because the likelihood will be you will stay over. And I said, right, okay. So I did that. And I did it quite quickly, but it wasn't really fast, if you know what I mean. But I did, within the hour we were in the hospital. And I remember getting over and going to A&E and the consultant standing there waiting for us saying, what kept you? And I remember thinking, she told me not to rush. So we went into A&E. David got his bloods done and they kept coming in and asking loads of questions about family history and I couldn't understand why. And then within about 3 hours, they basically said, your son is going to intensive care. He's got kidney failure. And I was like, right. And I had no idea what that meant, by the way. Absolutely none. I knew there was something, but I thought like maybe his sugar levels or something, like he needed a bit of a kick. That was about the height of it. He had 2 arms, he had 2 legs. He didn't look like there was anything wrong with him. So I was like, right, okay. And like he was 7 days old. I had just given birth. I was still really sore from labour. My emotions were all over the place. And I was like, right. And I remember getting the intensive care thinking, is my baby going to die? Like that was the height of the information they give us down there. And I remember like crying to the nurse in intensive care saying like, they tell you how to have a baby. They give you all the details, all the pain relief, all the things that can happen. They tell you bit by bit what is going to happen, but nobody actually tells you after. They don't explain, they don't go into the same depth. So I remember crying to her, and I remember her saying, your child is going to have lots of medical appointments. And I was thinking, right, at least he's not going to die. That's not the end of the world. And I'll never forget it. It was in the middle of the night and the renal consultant came in, and I remember she was wearing a white top and it felt like an angel had just came, and she had said, she was very nice, and she said, your child is really sick, but if I had got here sooner, your child wouldn't be in intensive care. So that made me feel a bit better because it was like, right, well, okay. So she said, your child will stay here till tomorrow and then we will move them on to the ward. So I was thinking, right, okay, that's not that bad. And then I said to her, so like, can you die with this? And she said, well, sometimes yes, but your child's not going to die. And then I said, is he going to be on dialysis? Which I had no idea what that was, by the way. I just had heard the term dialysis, didn't know anything about it. And she said, hopefully not. And I was like, right, okay. So the next day we went to the ward and we stayed there for 2 weeks, and they did lots of tests on him. And they came back and said that he had stage 5, grade 5 reflux. And it was probably the worst reflux she had ever seen in Northern Ireland. And his kidney function at that time, by the time they got him, was like 6%. But by the time they give him medication and fed him and evened out all his bloods, it went back up to about 18%. So he leveled off at 18%. At that point, she said, like, I worked full time. She said, I don't think you'll be able to go back to work. I was like, right. She said he'll get a feeding tube down his nose. And sure, a newborn baby, they just pull the feeding tube out all the time. And, it had to go back in. And I remember thinking, there's no way. I was a healthy woman. I had never experienced having to care for really a sick adult or anybody. I had never been in hospital bar having my own child. I'd never been sick. So I had no idea of what was coming down the line. But to be fair, David rallied round a wee bit, and he did get out of hospital without a feeding tube, because I was thinking, how am I going to go to work? And at the time, my daddy was due to retire. So I wasn't going to be able to go back to work. And I was doing a degree as well. In the middle of it all, I was doing a degree. And my mummy and daddy said, no, you are going back to work and your daddy is going to retire, because he was due to retire anyway, to be fair. So he retired a bit sooner, and we will help you. And David said, we will help you get through. And that's what happened. But we were fortunate enough that he didn't need a feeding tube for the first year. And I was feeling very empowered by that. This is great. He was eating minimal stuff, but it was enough to, put on weight, because every clinic appointment, they measured his weight. The nurse came out to the house to measure the weight to make sure he was still on target. But by the time he was 1, you knew he wasn't growing anymore. He wasn't able to keep up. And we had the consultant said at the time, it's now time for a feeding tube. And we discussed the options of, a tube going down your nose, a tube going into your tummy. And she had said, David has to get to the age of 4 before he can have a transplant. So you have, 3 years now, basically. And are we going to traumatize him by putting a feeding tube down his nose? Or are we going to insert a peg into his tummy? So we felt the best option at that time was to put a peg in a feeding tube in David's tummy. And he got that done at 1. I resisted the whole from 0 to 1. I resisted the feeding tube as much as I possibly could. But when we got that feeding tube, it genuinely transformed our lives, because you were able to get the fluids, the medicines. Even if he vomited them up, there was a way of getting them in. So the feeding tube really did transform our lives. And that was okay. But when he did that operation, when he came out of it, he didn't pee afterwards. And they were like, right, okay. So he was taken back down and they put a catheter in and was able to pee. And I remember the consultant saying, it's a plumbing issue. We don't need to worry about it now. And I remember thinking, well, when you call a plumber, he fixes the problem and then he goes again. So I remember that at the time. I didn't really think very much of it, because it was like, right, okay, well, it can be fixed. We'll move on.
So from birth, you had so many challenges to deal with, and the shock of when you've got that newborn baby and you think everything is okay, and then you see over time that there's something wrong, and then to have those fears confirmed must have been really challenging for you to go through that. And that first year of learning that he has CKD and then the feeding tube, but then seeing the benefit of the feeding tube and seeing how that transformed his life must have been very comforting through that time.
Totally. It totally was. And I suppose speaking to other parents as well, but it's just an emotional roller coaster from day one, because, you know, David was a sick baby, so you weren't able to get out to the mother and toddler groups. You weren't able to go out when your friends were all going out, you were mopping up sick or vomit, or, you were up all night long because, you needed to catch a urine sample. And if you didn't catch it, it was going to be another 24 hours before he peed. You knew he needed an antibiotic, but you didn't know which antibiotic because you had to get a pee. And as a baby, that's really hard because you need a clean catch. You can't really, they tell you to put a pad in the nappy, but 9 times out of 10 that comes back contaminated, and it's like, get it clean. So yeah, I mean, it was an emotional roller coaster, but the goal was always get to 4. So in my head, it was a short term. Once we get to 4 and we get a transplant, so we just kept going. We just dig deep. Whatever faced us, we just had to overcome it. And at 2, it was very much, David is going to need a urine bag, a suprapubic catheter put in at 2. And I remember I really couldn't get my head around that one. That was a very tough one. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, he's going to have a suprapubic catheter. And I was like, he's going to go to nursery. He's going to go to school with a bag, with a urine bag. And she was like, yes. And I remember my goal had always been to make sure that David was as independent as he could possibly be. And I was like, it just didn't sit well with me, the suprapubic catheter. And I remember saying, but it's the 21st century. Are you telling me there are no alternatives, that David is going to have to go to school with a urine bag wrapped around his leg? And she said, well, there's a thing called a metrobanov, and it's an operation and there's a hole in the belly button, but they generally get that when they're older. And I said, no, I want that now. And we will do whatever it takes to manage that. Whatever aftercare, we will manage that at home. If he's to get catheterized every 2 hours, which was what was going to have to happen, we will do that. He would have to have an indwelling catheter at night with a urine bag going in at night, hanging for while he's sleeping. I was like, we will do all of that. And she said, I will go away and speak to the surgeon, but we've never done it on a 2-year-old before. I don't think he will be happy about that. So I was like, well, then I would like to meet him. But I didn't need to. He agreed to do it at 2. He did the metrobanov, and we still have a metrobanov now, and he will have it all his life. And it has been fabulous. It has been great for David, and it empties his bladder because he doesn't fully empty his bladder. And we needed that done before transplant. So from 2 to 4, David had a relatively no hospital stays or things like that.
So for people that don't understand about that type of catheterization, what is involved? You said he has to be catheterized every 2 hours. So what does that mean?
So that means there's a hole in his belly button and we have a catheter and we put the catheter into the belly button and drain whatever urine is left in his bladder. So he can still go to the bathroom. He still goes to the bathroom himself, but he doesn't fully empty his bladder. So every 2 hours we go in, and he's 10 now, so he's getting a bit better at doing it himself. But we go in and empty his bladder. We just do it, like David has to go to the bathroom and we go to the bathroom and catheterize him and then he comes out again. There's no pain, there's no issues, and he took to it very well, to be fair. But that was a requirement for transplant, that because if he wasn't emptying his bladder, it was going to damage the kidney transplant. So we needed to find a solution to ensure that the urine didn't go from the bladder up to the kidney. And that's what we do. So he will do that for the rest of his life.
So when you say every 2 hours, is that literally throughout the night as well?
No, so throughout the night, when he goes to bed at about 8 or 9, we put a catheter, an indwelling catheter in, and we tape it to his belly. And then the urine, we have a big urine, like a 3-litre bag, and it's attached to the catheter and it just drains in. And then we take it off in the morning and dispose of it, and he goes off to school.
So it's every 2 hours during the day. That's a big commitment. That sounds very challenging.
It is. It's massive, and particularly when you go to school, because he obviously then needs a classroom assistant. Because he was so young, he needed an assistant who was medically trained in doing it. So he does that in school and anywhere he goes. So like this morning, he's singing in a concert at the weekend and he has drama for 4 hours. So he was catheterized before he went in. I went in 2 hours later and catheterized him, and I'm now sitting outside waiting till he's finished to catheterize him again. So yes, it is very labour intensive, but it gives him the freedom, to not have a bag around his leg, basically. So yeah, I mean, it works for us. I'm not going to lie, it's very, very challenging, and there always has to be somebody. If it's not mummy, daddy, granny, granda, somebody trained. You can't just leave him. And that can pose challenges, if the classroom assistant's sick or the 2 people that are trained in school are sick. We have to go in and do that if he wants to attend school, if we want him to attend school. So it can be challenging, yeah. But yeah, we just have to do it. It's just part and parcel. We made that decision to ensure that he can have a free life. He doesn't have it attached to him, or we made that decision, so we have to deal with. But yeah, it is challenging.
I'm sitting here amazed, because to make that commitment as a parent cannot be easy. But like you said, you're doing it because you want him to be able to access the kind of activities that children do, be able to do drama and things like that, and to be able to attend school. I just have to say, you're absolutely amazing. David went on to have a kidney transplant. So tell me about how that came about.
Okay, so it was sort of a given, really. And I don't know, we're from Northern Ireland, and I don't know if you know about our transplant unit in Northern Ireland, but we have one of the best, if not the best, transplant unit in, I would say, probably say the world. But we have an excellent live donation programme. So it was kind of a given who out of mummy and daddy is going to be a match to donate and who is the better match. And it was quite clear I knew what my blood group was. So it was quite clear from the offset that I wasn't a blood group match. So we knew that David's daddy was a blood group match. So he was tested, and it was sort of just a given that David's daddy was donating his kidney to him. And we just needed to get to 4. So we got there on the 24th of October. David's daddy went into the city hospital. So that's the other thing. We have a children's hospital and an adult's hospital, so they're not together. So David's daddy was in the city hospital and David was in the children's. So David's daddy stayed overnight, and at about 8 o'clock the next morning, on the 25th of October 2016, David's daddy went down to get his kidney removed. And I was in the children's with David. And the city hospital rang over at about 11 or half 11 and said the kidney has been removed. All has went well. We are on our way. So at that stage, then David was brought down to theatre to be knocked out. And that was pretty traumatic because you were handing your baby over for a very long time. And we call theatre Neverland, like Peter Pan. So at the time, we had a story for David that he was going to Neverland and Daddy was going to be in Neverland, and because he liked Peter Pan. So we had this story. So we actually still call theatre Neverland. David, you're going to Neverland. So he went down and the anaesthetist knocked him out, and I went back to the ward. And I'll never forget it. The surgeon who took Jim's kidney out came up to the ward with a big white box with Jim's kidney, which Jim's kidney was in, and said, "It's been removed. Here, I'm on my way. You can go over to the city now and see Jim." So I was like, right, okay. And off he went with the white box down to theatre to the other surgeon. So there was 2 surgeons. And I went over to see Jim, David's daddy, and he was still a wee bit out of it, but he seemed fine. I stayed there till about 5 o'clock in the evening. And then I came back over because I was expecting David out at about 5:30. Came back over and he didn't come back out. But his renal consultant had rang to say everything was going well. The kidney was pretty big and David was pretty small, so they were having difficulty closing him up. But it was just going to take a bit longer than what we had thought. So I sort of knew at that stage it was fine. Yeah, and David came out about 7:30, 8 o'clock that night. And that was a wee bit surreal because you were in hospital with your child and then Jim was in another hospital and you can't be in 2 places at once. So that was a wee bit different, to be fair. And then, and then they just managed David and his bloods and his sodium levels and all that kind of stuff in intensive care. And, as a parent, I absolutely hate intensive care. Because it's intensive care, but I also hate it because the nurses are fully in control and you have spent all your days caring for your child. You know your child inside out, and it's like, touch him at your peril, touch our buttons and you're dead, So I really struggle with intensive care because it's basically sit there and we're doing the work. So I find that pretty hard because your natural instinct is just to do everything for him. So we did that, and David is also autistic, and we didn't know that at the time, but he would only drink water. So he wouldn't drink diluted juice, wouldn't drink any other form of juice. They were trying to manage his sodium levels, so they wouldn't let him drink the water. And, he was 4 years old. There was merry hell going down in intensive care because, they were pumping lots of fluids into him. That's the bit that David remembers, that he wasn't allowed to drink any water. And that's the bit that I remember because he was inconsolable till the next morning, and then it all leveled off and he was fine. And about 11 o'clock on the 26th of October, maybe 11:30, David's daddy walked into intensive care and there he was. So he had got out the next morning. So it was still pretty sore, but he was able to make it over from the city. And I think he was sore probably for about a month after it, like not just an uncomfortable sore. It wasn't, but he made it look actually pretty easy, to be fair. And then we spent 2 weeks in hospital, and it was quite clear from the outset that David wasn't going to be an easy patient. So within about maybe 7 days, he took toxicity to the anti-rejection medicine. So he had to go back down and get a biopsy done because his creatinine just jumped and we didn't know why. So he took toxicity to the anti-rejection medicine. And then from then, for about the next 10 months, he was just constantly ill. He was constantly catching bugs. He was constantly having urine infections, but also showing no symptoms. So it was only when we went for routine bloods that we would see that his creatinine was rising. So we had lots of biopsies after that to try and determine he had pyelonephritis, he had a severe kidney infection, and he was literally doing somersaults in the ward, like literally doing somersaults, and they couldn't understand. So he had lots of complications. And then at 10 months, the creatinine jumped and he had to go for a biopsy. And at that point, it was quite clear that he had rejection. So he had to have plasma exchange. And I'm sure some people know what plasma exchange is. So it's a line in your neck. And it's a bit like dialysis, only it's your plasma. They're taking out your plasma and washing the antibodies. So he had that for about 5 days. And the problem with that is that we didn't have a pediatric plasma exchange. So the plasma exchange team had to come from adults over with their machine to the children's to do plasma exchange and steroids. And that leveled off, that held the kidney function. So, ideally we were hoping to get 15, 20 years out of that kidney. It was quite clear at that point that that wasn't going to happen. When I asked his consultant, how long do you think he's going to get? She said, I think between 5 to 7 years, but I could be wrong. So that was fine. We went away. Eventually, probably after about 18 months to 2 years, it all settled. And he was fine. He had the kidney function that he had. And we probably got 2 more years of no hospital admissions, no infections, living life to the full, as David will, as much as he possibly could within the remits of chronic kidney disease. And then at that point, you could see that the kidney was declining. So we're now 6 years in and his kidney has declined. And we did a live, we went on TV to try and get live donors. I knew I wasn't the match. I thought I could have went into the UK-wide pool, but they told me that my blood group was one of the rare ones and they really needed a more general, a more common blood group match to go into the UK pool. We got that and we got a donor to go in, and we've done 2 runs so far of the UK-wide pool and we haven't got a match. He's on the deceased donor list. We haven't got a match. Anybody who has come forward, which they said was substantial amount of people have come forward, he is not a match to any of those people. So we have a problem because the kidney is failing. There's no second kidney anywhere that we can find. And my promise to David was always to keep him off dialysis for as long as I possibly could. For the rest of his life, I would do my utmost to make sure he didn't go on dialysis. And about 3 weeks ago, the kidney was declining. We knew it was declining. And it was at that stage, right, it's now time to go on dialysis. So David had the hemodialysis line. But as part of the transplant journey, the transplant team knew that David was going to be hard to match. So they said, would you consider an ABO, incompatible transplant? So my blood group is AB and David's is B. So they decided to test me and test David to look into this. It's a relatively new transplant. It's not the go-to transplant. It's not, they much prefer you to be a blood group match and an antibody match. But the alternative was going to be that David would be on dialysis for a very long time, potentially. And I'm not really prepared to sit back and just do. So the transplant team, as of last week, have just agreed that I can donate to David, but as an incompatible transplant. So the risk of rejection is higher, but the outcomes seem to be very, very good. So we are just basically now waiting on a date for that.
That is quite a journey there. from receiving the kidney from his dad to then having a lot of complications where he was having urine infections and a lot of hospitalization, to that finally settling and having those 2 years where he was able to be appointment free and get on with life, and then to go back into rejection, and then now looking at finding another donor, and in the meantime being on dialysis. You as a family have been through so much, and at such a young age to go through so much challenges and ups and downs. I mean, how have you managed that? How have you been able to get through all of that?
I honestly don't know. And when I think about it too much, it scares the life out of me. But you just dig deep. You just have to get up every day and keep going. There's no alternative. What is the alternative? And don't get me wrong, like there's many's a day I drive to work after leaving David at school and be roaring down the motorway because it has taken all his might to get up out of bed to face the world that day, you know, and me and all of us as a family. But you just do it. You just have to. There are good days, there are bad days. You know, David absolutely loves drama. David wants to be a professional actor. 2 weeks ago, before he got his dialysis line in, so on the Friday, a week before he got his dialysis line in, David travelled to Dublin for his first paid professional role in drama, in acting. So, you know, to see him reaching his full potential and doing things, you know, one Friday he's in Dublin filming and the next Friday he's being wheeled to theatre to get a hemo line in. You know, to see those things makes it all worth it. So, yeah, but it is a challenge. It is super hard. And any parent of a child with CKD, even though I don't have it, some days I feel like I do because I feel like I'm living it for him, if you know what I mean. The journey, the challenges that we face every single day. But we just have to do it. We just have to get up and get on with it. And, you know, at the minute, David is not happy. He's on dialysis and it is restricting him and his ability to do the things that he wants to do. And we can't control that. You know, the body is saying, right, David, you're tired. You know, we can't control that for him. And he'll just tell you, you know, chronic kidney disease sucks, mummy. And I'm like, do you know what it does? It's about validating those feelings because it does suck. But as I always tell him, it's only temporary. We will find a solution. And hopefully that solution is I give him a kidney and it works for a very long time. Doesn't, we'll have to face those challenges. But the alternative is to sit on dialysis the whole way through his teenage years, potentially with no donor. And I'm not prepared to do that as a mother. I'm just not. So yeah, it's an emotional roller coaster and it teases you because you got those 2 years that were relatively good and then it's like bang, back in again, back with all the challenges, you know, managing sodium, managing hemoglobin, looking at creatinine, the urea, what's he eating, you know, all those things. Yeah, you just have to, it's a journey and nobody can prepare you. Nobody. They can tell you. And I suppose that's probably my big thing with transplant. You know, while it is the gift of life, it most definitely is. And when it works extremely well. I am very clear that it is a form of treatment and it doesn't last. Particularly for children, they will not get their lifetime out of one kidney transplant. So they need multiple kidney transplants. So I do personally get a wee bit frustrated sometimes when you see the promotional, you know, oh, it's a gift of life. And it is. It most definitely is. But for our children, for children diagnosed with CKD from a young age, it is a form of treatment. And I don't think that we maybe tell that story enough in the kidney world. I don't think that we tell the story that it is a form of treatment. It's an alternative to dialysis because our kids will need more than one. The likelihood is 2 or 3 if you've got CKD from birth to get you through your lifetime. So yeah, so it's never going to end. For David, it will always be, even when he gets his next kidney, if he gets 20 years out of that, he's going to be 30. He's going to need another one, or he's going to need dialysis. It's never going to end. So we have to learn how to live with it.
So in terms of an incompatible kidney, in terms of the procedure and what they're going to do in order to make it compatible, do you know what it involves? Like, how do they take a kidney that isn't compatible and make it compatible?
It's the same. Well, for me, it doesn't matter. I'll still lose the kidney in the same way that everybody else does. What they do is, I don't know the exact detail, but what they do is, if you have the antibodies, high antibodies for the person who's donating, if it's high, they plasma exchange it. So they do the same as what they did in rejection. But they anticipate that David and I are such a good antibody match that he won't need that plasma exchange. So that is a plus. But most recipients who are receiving an ABO incompatible transplant will have plasma exchange before, maybe like a week of plasma exchange and a treatment beforehand, before they go down then to receive the kidney. So that would be planned as part of the process before the date of donation. David and I are such a good match that we won't need to do that. So that's a benefit for him.
Right. So your blood groups are incompatible, but your antibodies are compatible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
For what there is there, it's relatively low. So they feel that he won't need the treatment, the plasma exchange beforehand, which is a benefit for him.
So I know that when we had a discussion before, you mentioned that the workup process for kidney donation is slightly different in Northern Ireland. So would you like to share what that difference is?
Okay, so we have a fantastic renal consultant in our transplant unit called Aisling Courtney. She's the lead person in our transplant unit in Northern Ireland. And she has come up with a live donation day, basically. So people who volunteer to come and donate their kidney, once they get over the initial blood group, take your blood and your urine and all that and make sure that you're fit and healthy enough to do it. In Northern Ireland, they bring you in for a full day and you go in at 7:30 in the morning and you're probably still there at 5:00 in the evening, and you go through every test on that one day. Yeah, so we did that. You did CT scans, bloods, MRIs, all these different, you're put through your paces for the day, but it means that you don't have to keep coming backwards and forwards. It's not delayed. It's all done in the one day, and then they take all those results away and the team look at it the following week or the following 2 weeks and decide whether you're our donor. So that makes the process a lot easier, because you don't have maybe 8 or 9 hospital visits before, or a year of waiting about. You go in one day and within a couple of weeks whether you are going to be a match and a donor. So yeah, and you get x-rays, and the first one for me was, we're going down to make sure you have 2 kidneys. And I was like, what? That never entered my head that I wouldn't have 2 kidneys. So, yeah, so that was we did all of that on the one day. Yeah, so it was pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And then they tell you whether you can donate or not at the end.
So everything's condensed in the one day. So essentially, a lot faster whether you're compatible and able to donate.
Yeah, most definitely.
So I wanted to talk a bit more about the psychological side and the invisibility of CKD, because as anyone living with CKD would know, me speaking as an adult, the number one thing people say to me is, you don't look sick. But when you have a child that is presenting healthy but has all those challenges that David has faced since birth, that must be even more difficult, because as an adult you can explain and you can kind of challenge people's misconceptions, but when a child might even be running around and you're saying, well, actually they've got chronic kidney disease and they don't understand. Let's delve a bit more into that. So what have been the challenges in terms of the psychological side and the invisibility of the disease as a parent with a child with CKD?
They have been massive, absolutely, and God help the people who have got me on a wrong day, on a bad day, because I can't keep it shut. It's very, very frustrating. People will say to you all the time, he looks great. I've had a person say to me, if you give him to me for a day late, and I'm thinking, off you go, give it a good go. Let's see how well. Yeah, very, very frustrating. But as a parent, you just have to learn how to rise above that. But I suppose the big one is probably school. That's the big one. Teachers are lovely, they're sympathetic, but they don't actually get it. And when he is in school, he is presenting like a normal child, but they don't see underneath the uniform where there's a feeding tube, there's a metrobanov, now there's a hemoline. He does present as fit, and he doesn't look that bad. He doesn't look sick, but yet you've maybe been up all night with his head down a toilet and you've given him an anti-sickness tablet so he doesn't vomit. Or, he has a feeding tube on all night because you're flushing him with so much water, like 3 or 4 litres of water a day. It's very, very frustrating. And it does come at a cost for David, because the psychological elements of that and of kidney disease in general is massive. I think it's massive for any CKD patient, but I think it's probably particularly hard for kids because in one hand, they don't understand their emotions. They don't understand. And that is hard. And I probably firmly believe, I suppose we're 10 years into this journey, but I believe that from the initial diagnosis, whether you like it or not, you should have a renal psychologist and you should be attached to one that you can tap into whenever you need it, because the illness is so unpredictable that you could be fine for 6 weeks and then all of a sudden it's like crash land. So I do definitely think that we don't do enough around the psychology element and the trauma that comes along with it. Even on a good day, there's trauma. So I feel very passionately about that, and I feel very strongly about that we in the kidney community tell the success stories and tell all the great things and the benefits, but we don't in some ways explain or sell the downsides, the disadvantages enough. And I suppose some people prefer to keep their illness to themselves, and don't like to go, and that's fair enough. But I do think that we're doing children and adults a disservice by not talking about the disadvantages as well that people or children and adults with CKD have to live with on a daily basis. The challenges are immense, and you can never explain it to anybody unless they've had it or they are a close family member. And that's why I think the kidney community is so important and so helpful, because they are the people that actually really get you through. It's not, your friend or your cousin or because they're not living with you. They're not living with it day and daily. And even for the kids, it's great to see, well, there's somebody else who has a metrobanov, or there's somebody else who's had a transplant, or, it's good for them to see, or, the older kids versus the younger kids. Well, there's the teenagers now, look at them. They've had a transplant, they're off moving on to adults, and, you can see the journey. So I think all of that is super important to keep everybody sane, basically, is probably the best way to put it. But yeah, I mean, the psychological damage is just heartbreaking. But all you can do is make sure, as a parent, is make sure that your child has the skills and the support to overcome those challenges. And to be fair, David does definitely have his challenges, but he does take them well, to be fair. But yeah, the line at the minute is chronic kidney disease sucks. Yeah, it does for everybody.
So what are the disadvantages and challenges that you would like to highlight?
I suppose the mental trauma that people don't see. People don't see the being sick in a hospital bed, the maybe the 3 different doctors having to come and do your bloods because you can't get any blood out of a child. It's not the same as an adult. Like you literally need about 4 people to hold them down till you get the blood out of them. There's trauma in all of it, but yet you present your child, with 2 arms and 2 legs and a smile on their face, and it's like, oh, well, sure, there's nothing wrong with them. I just think that they need more support, that adult support, that psychological support to manage their emotions, because they are internalized, they are there. And I mean, I don't know about yourself, but I'm sure there have been difficult days for you, but you just, you either know how to manage those, or you're able to find support. Whereas kids, they don't understand, they don't know. And even for us as adults, it is a trauma. You do have to be able to manage those. And I do think we should talk about that an awful lot more than what we do.
Absolutely. And like you said, yes, as an adult, when people ask me how I am, how is it living with CKD, I always say good days, bad days. And that's the best way that I can express it. There's days where, you're on top of the world, and there's some days where you just, like your son says, CKD sucks. So yeah, absolutely. So my final question to you is, what word of encouragement do you have for parents who have children living with CKD?
My words of encouragement would be just keep going, dig deep and just keep going, because there is, and it does make me quite emotional, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Just keep going, and firmly believe that there is light and it will get better. There is good days and there's bad days, but just keep going, because they need you to be strong. They need you to keep going for them. So to just keep going.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing the story of your family, David's story, everything that you have been through. You have been so amazing, so encouraging. I really take my hat off to you genuinely, because your journey, it's so inspirational. The highs and the lows that you've been kind to share with us. Thank you so much. I know that this will help so many parents listening and knowing that they are not alone in their journeys with their children with CKD. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to give the final word to David, who has joined us for the last part of this interview. And David, what is your message of encouragement for children who are living with CKD?
Just keep going.
Thank you for listening to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. And don't forget that you can contact me on social media using the handle Diary of a Kidney Warrior. Please do subscribe to the podcast, and please do tell a friend. New episodes of this podcast are released every other Monday. Until next time, take care and choose to live.
Diary of a Kidney Warrior, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.